Hi everyone, my name is Ryan, a professional Go player, and welcome back to part 2 of the outdated Josekis. We had an amazing kickoff with part 1, so thank you all for your support and your comments in the first part of the video. And if you haven't watched it, please click the link in the description where you will see 5 of the outdated star point Josekis. Before I move on to the 3-4 point Joseki, I'd just like to remind you that it's important to not get lost in the complicated variations. Go is an amazingly large project, and many players have spent their whole lives studying and improving on their Go skills. It is important for us to learn the simple variations first, and then dive into the more complicated ones and build ourselves up from the ground. That being said, let's get right into the first 3-4 point outdated Joseki. The first Joseki we'll talk about today is a 3-4 point and high approach Joseki. Many players like to play the knight's move. This is a very common Joseki in the books. White would attach into the 3-3. This third line attachment is very important. When two stones are one space apart on the fourth line, attaching under on the third line is a good way of stealing territory. And this is what white is doing. After white attaches, black hanes, white pulls back, black finishes the shape with a tiger's mouth, and then white plays the extension. White can also extend one space further, but with a further extension, it's more efficient, but when black plays a pincer next to it, white will need to protect later. So that's up to your preference. This Joseki is actually better for white, and that is because black's corner has about the same amount of territory as white. Arguably, white has more territory. The influence is similar, because even though black has a higher stone here, black does not have very much potential yet. So black needs to work very hard later on as well to achieve that. The recommended level for this Joseki is 10Q+. To put this Joseki in a bit more perspective, sometimes in the Chinese opening, a strategy is that when white approaches here, black would play the knight's move. And because black already has a stone at R9, when white attaches and pulls back, black would extend into the corner. This threatens white's eye space, although it leaves the left side much more open, so when white has a stone on the left side, black also needs to protect. However, this variation is still considered okay for white, and that is because white is completely settled, and black had so many stones to begin with. So where should black play right now? Black should actually play the hane this way when white attaches. And that is due to the fact that black already has a stone at R9. When white cuts, black can play a very strong move, Atari this way and pull back. And then, after white Ataris twice, white would live in the corner. This is a better option for black, and it's also AI recommended for the Chinese opening if white approaches inside. Black can Tanuki now and develop the influence in the middle. Keep in mind in this variation, white cannot Atari at R5 because of the R9 stone, black will be able to capture white. In the regular Joseki, where should black play? Well, in my opinion, black should just choose a different Joseki. For example, we always have the one-space pincer or lower attachment. Both of these are popular options. Today is related to the high approach as well, and black attaches under. This time, white does not hane at R6, instead white chooses the small avalanche. Now the avalanche Joseki are famous because of how complicated they are, and many players would simply not play it. However, there is a simple one, and arguably the small avalanche is way simpler compared to the large avalanche. I know from experience. Now, the small avalanche is where black hanes directly. What is called the large avalanche is when black extended one more time and then hanes. We will only be discussing the small avalanche today, when black hanes at Q6 directly, and then white cuts, black extends, and white descends. This tries to get at both the R6 cut as well as the weakness at P2. So black, of course, needs to turn first. This is a sente move. White needs to play the tiger's mouth. Some players like to play the extension if they have the ladder. However, this is a common misplayed move. The tiger's mouth is almost always better. When white plays the tiger's mouth, one of the Joseki variations is that black would Atari. White cuts and sacrifices the stones at P3 and O4. So black captures, white turns, and black Ataris. Be careful here, this is not a ko, white cannot capture because black would be able to play P6. White needs to turn, black captures, then white captures as well. This Joseki is better for white, and that is because, again, white has more territory than black. The influence is only slightly better for black, but keep in mind that black started with the corner again. This is a very important aspect to keep in mind when you're evaluating the outcome of a Joseki. The recommended level for this Joseki is 1 down plus, because the difference is not very huge. So if you're wondering about where black should play instead, the meta here for this variation is that black should extend and then block. This is pretty much the outcome of the small avalanche nowadays if you see it in a pro game. The P6 and O5 exchange is not necessarily urgent right now, so black can actually block directly at S4. Then when white cuts, black Ataris, pushes one more time, then finish off the corner. This is a much more preferred variation for black compared to the outdated one. Now in the center, white cannot capture the two stones. If white nets at A, black can escape by attaching at B. I personally like this variation for black because black gains a lot of territory. However, the fight in the center is much unsettled and both players could gain the advantage here. The third Joseki we'll discuss is probably one that many players heard about, and it's a relatively famous one in which the AI has really changed our way of thinking. So, this Joseki is the two-space high pincer for the one-space high approach. And this is called the magic sword. Some people call it the flying knife, depending on which sources you look. And this Joseki used to be known for very, very complicated variations, because black has a lot of ways of trying to trick white. Now, black can play Q4, which is a pretty popular trick move. We also have the regular move, which is P5. And after the regular move, P5, white would hane. Black then would extend to split off the large knight's move. Then, when white extends, another branches of trick moves happen again, where black might be able to block at P4, or extend at P3, or, in the old Joseki variation, black would jump at O3. Then, white would hane, black connects, white pushes on top, black extends, and at this point, white could either play A or B. White could play the tiger's mouth if just to protect the shape, but if white really wants to gain more, and white has the ladder, then white would descend at B. So if white protects at A, black would extend. This Joseki is actually an even result. But why is this outdated? This Joseki is actually outdated because white has a much better option when black plays the one-space jump at O3. White can actually push right through and simply capture the stone, instead of the hane. White can push at P4, black needs to connect here, of course, then white can push through. Before it used to be considered that after black haned, then connected, and cuts, black's outside influence is very good. However, after white Ataris, white gains a very large corner. That's pretty much 15 points. So the AI recommended variation is that white would play this all the time and then come back at K4 to limit black's influence. This is similar to the 3-3 invasion Joseki, in which white takes a sente territory and then can come back to reduce the influence after you take sente. This Joseki is better for white, and the recommended level is 3 down plus. This recommended level is fairly high, and we're really getting up there, and that is because I think you do have to be a really high level in order to really feel the difference between black's really strong outside influence as well as white's very nice corner territory. So the difference isn't really huge. if you're a 3-dan plus player, I would personally just recommend not playing the 2-space high pincer anymore. However, now you know that if your opponent plays it, exactly how to deal with it. The next Joseki we'll discuss today is the low approach. Black would play a 2-space low pincer. Now, this pincer is not necessarily unique for this Joseki I'm talking about. So let's focus on the variations that will happen later. When white plays the knight's move, sometimes black would extend below. When black extends here, when white extends and black jumps out. Then when white attaches into the corner, black connects. Then white connects as well. Then black plays the 2-space extension. This Joseki is better for white. The territory between black and white are very similar. However, white takes sente, and on top of that, black's R8 stone is not being used very well. In addition, it could be a weak group if white pincers at R10 later. This Joseki is better for white, and the recommended level is 5Q+. It does not matter where the pincer stone is. As long as the pincer stone is between Q8 or any of these 2-space or 3-space pincer regions, this Joseki is better for white. How should we avoid this Joseki as black? The first way for black to avoid this is to resist by pushing and cutting that stone off. Before, we thought that this is not possible, and that is because after white pushes, black can't deal with the cut, because black cannot Atari at M2, since the corner will die. Black would need to connect, then white would be able to ladder the outside stone. That would definitely not be good for black. However, since black does not block, black can play the hane, and this is the AI recommended variation. Then, when white hanes, then black extends back. Many players still think this is slightly better for white though, and that is because of the R8 stone again. This stone is too close, and it's not being used very effectively. Later on, white still has a tiger's mouth in sente, so white is quite strong on the lower side and has a lot of influence. This variation is considered a Joseki. However, the result really depends on the surroundings, and keep in mind that black can play this result without the R8 stone. So perhaps it's actually better for black to simply tenuki the approaching move if black wants to extend under at any time. So that means whenever white plays, if we go back to the beginning, the low approach, pincer, and knight's move, black should, in theory, push and cut. However, this is a very complicated variation. And for completion, I'll just show you one of them, and due to the time interest, I definitely won't be able to go over these variations in too much detail. When black pushes and cuts and extends, white has a good move, the kosumi, and this threatens to escape using the to play in between this elephant jump at Q7. So black needs to play the knight's move, white jumps, and black attaches. And then, after white clamps, white actually plays a sacrificing variation and takes the corner in sente, and black keeps this territory and some influence as well. Some people like this for white, some people like this for black, so I take this to be a Joseki as well. The fifth Joseki we'll discuss today is the low approach and 2-space high pincer. I talked about this Joseki in my previous lectures actually, so if you're familiar with this, you probably know what I'm going to say. Now, when white plays the knight's move, black pushes and cuts. We know from before white-black should push and cut. When white attaches, black extends. White extends, and black plays the knight's move, then white would hane. This variation is actually better for black. But why is it better for black? I can actually explain this using a different method. If we start from earlier again, black plays a 2-space extension, white plays a 2-space extension, black plays a knight's move, and white plays another knight's move. Weird, right? But if we kind of consider these as even moves, which they look quite even, right? Both players taking the sides each, and both players playing a move into the center. However, the next moves you will see why the white exchanges are actually all pretty bad. Now, black attaches on the outside. Of course, this is not going to be a good exchange, But this move does have its use. Later on, black can hane at r9 to reduce white's right side if white builds there. But white also played 2 exchanges as well, and both of these exchanges are bad exchanges because they lose points and gives black a more solid outside variation. And due to the fact that black's exchange is not as bad, but white exchange is clearly worse, this Joseki is actually better for black. How should white play then if the previous variation is better for black? Well, white should, in this case, block. After black hanes and connects, white then atari. After black extends, then white jumps. This is another AI recommended variation. However, this fight is extremely complicated. White has typically 3 moves to continue, A, B, or C. And in the interest of time, again, I will not go over these in detail. But keep in mind that white does have a choice. Even though it seems like white has to go with a super complicated variation or just suffer from a loss, that is not true. White has a clever move to deal with the 2-space high pincer, and that is the kusumi right here. Now, it's important not to attach at r3 first, and that is because, well, Joseki taught us that whenever white plays the attach and tiger's mouth, we should always atari. And that is true because white's outside is relatively weak and black takes the corner in sente. So I'll just show you the variation here in case you're not familiar with this. White definitely needs to atari on the outside, black captures and then plays the tiger's mouth. Here, black has 2 peeping moves, so white's shape is actually quite heavy. Now, previously, we were taught a way that AIs played to handle this. However, it's not super intuitive, and I don't personally recommend this method. It's just white simply connects and then sacrifices the corner. So, for example, white could cut, atari, and then tenuki, or simply settle the group like this. I think these situations are more difficult to judge, and since I personally don't fully understand this, I just recommend this other variation in which we just simply play the start point. And if black extends outside, then we get what we want, right? White just hanes and extends, white settles, black settles, and this is no doubt an even variation. White takes sente and settles the group, and black just builds on the lower side. If black extends into the corner though, when white hanes, if black cuts, white would descend, and black's corner would actually get captured. So, here, there you have it, an easy way to deal with a complicated variation. While we're talking about 3-4 point Josekis, I'd like to end the video with a brief discussion on the 3-4 point and attachment. How should we handle this move? First of all, I'd like to say that the recommended level for this move is 5 down plus. If you're not at this level, it's very hard to handle the correct timing and when you couldn't use this move. Personally, I still have trouble dealing with this very well, and I play this very, very rarely as white. So what is this move trying to do? Well, if black hanes, then the benefit for white is having the choice of either side. Black can hane at A or B. For example, if white hanes here, black would atari connect, then white would push twice and play a knight's move. Now, this is only a possibility if black has a Chinese opening in which black would already have a stone at r9. Then black's moyo would be flattened. However, of course, white is giving black all of the solid territory on the right side, and that is exactly why that this move is very situational. The second variation is that black extends on the outside. And this is especially the case if black already has a stone in the r9 area because it forces white to continue on the right side where black has stones and can pressure white. So when white extends, black blocks. Now these moves all look very strange because, white is playing right next to black, right? And the benefit about these moves is that white has a nice hane and tiger's mouth. This exchange is usually considered good for white because these are sente. T2, believe it or not, is a very urgent move right now. If white takes t2, white is alive and black is not. And on the other hand, when black Atari is here, black can continue to pressure white and black's group is alive. And that's why this move is very important. And black cannot let white get t2. And after this, white would typically play a knight's move, which makes a flexible shape, because if white ever needs to build I space, white can start the ko. Again, this variation is very situational. It's difficult to grasp whether and when to play this variation. So if you're not sure about any of the AI recommended moves, I would personally avoid playing it until you fully understand the details. And this is how I typically learn from AIs when I review with them. This concludes part 2 of the outdated Josekis. We covered 5 Joseki as well as a bonus discussion with a popular AI recommended move. If there's anything that I didn't make clear, or if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments. If there's enough discussion that's required, I'll make a separate video answering your questions on these 10 variations as well as the 2 bonus variations that we discussed. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving a like and subscribing to our channel. We post Go content every week. My name is Ryan, and I'll catch you next time.